Welcome, everyone, to the CRM MVP podcast, episode number 103. This episode is actually a request from one of our listeners. They reached out to me on LinkedIn and they said, "Hey, man, I noticed that there are some people that are certified on like as Dynamics 365 or I think Power Platform architects that you pass a test and then you get certified. But then I noticed there's another group of people that kind of get like a better recognition from Microsoft. There are these fast track solution architects. Like, what's up with that?" And they recommended or they asked me to interview somebody on the show, and I reach out to my buddy Andrew. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Gus. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, thank you for being here. I invited my buddy Andrew to come on the show. He's an MVP, and he also happens to be a brand new minted FastTrack Recognized Solution Architect. Congratulations,
Thank you very
Andrew,
much.
for that.
Yeah, that's right. They awarded it earlier this month, so April.
Absolutely. So, Andrew, tell us a little bit about you. Besides the fact you're an MVP and a fast track solution architect, now everyone knows that. Where do you live? What do you do for a living? When do you start working with Dynamics? Just give us like a quick story about your professional career working with business applications.
Yeah, so I live in Adelaide, South Australia, and I have been working with Dynamics. I'm going to say about 10 to 12 years before I fully got onto the platform. And I was made an MVP in 2018. My memory serves me correct. And then obviously pivoting to that Power Platform once it was sort of released and getting some experience under my belt. And hopefully we'll talk about some of this a little bit later. But that's what has sort of led me down the track of being recognized as a fast track recognized solution architect.
That's awesome. And Andrew, you were on the MVP summit, right, in 2018? Because I've met you in person, or I met
Yes.
you in person somewhere for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Yeah, it was a fantastic experience, and it's just a shame that we can't do it in person once again because I really have a great time at those summits in Redmond, and yeah, and getting to spend a lot of quality time with quality individuals in the same sort of ecosystem as us. And business applications just been a phenomenal experience.
Right. And yeah, I feel bad for, a lot of the MVPs that have been awarded over the last couple of years because we've been going through this pandemic obviously and everything is virtual, and I feel like the MVP summit is such a great place. And people like Nick Hayduke, for example, who has been an MVP now for like
Mm.
2 years. He has never been to the summit, but the years before becoming an MVP, like Nick was a very deserving MVP for like the longest time. He was hanging out with us. Like he was at the medics booth. He was, essentially like a honorary MVP. And and he hears all of these like hype behind the MVP summit and be like, "Oh man, it's the craziest thing." And he's like, "But like, why? What do you guys do?" And he's like, "We can't tell you anything about it, because everything is under NDA." So he was really looking forward to it, and I feel like once he got the MVP award, they went virtual. So
Oh, I
I feel
know.
bad for her.
Yeah, Mario Trevor is a guy who I work very closely with as well as a couple of guys, Prashant Shukla, who've recently
Hmm.
been awarded MVPs, and I've been sort of telling them how awesome it is to go over to the States, meet all these individuals, and then all that happened.
And exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's so bad. All right. So let me tell you my story, at least regarding this whole, uh, I guess, fast track recognized solution architect. Okay. So back in 2015, June of 2015, I started working on this project with the solution architects that Microsoft had. So Microsoft had this group of people working for the product team, which wasn't very common. There were solution architects. These solution architects, they were like four when I started working with them.
Okay.
And these guys are Jason Kim, Darren Liu, who used to be a Microsoft MVP before he joined Microsoft. And once he joined Microsoft, you lose your MVP. A lot of people don't know that, but Darren was an MVP, joined Microsoft to become a solution architect with them, and lost his MVP status. Roger Gilchrist, who lives in England, and
Hmm.
he's amazing. Like that guy knows a lot. He was a solution architect for Microsoft, And they all work with Girk and Salk, and all of these people. Prashant was another of the architects, just really, really very smart individuals. I really like hanging out with them because it felt like an MVP summit in a way. Like
Mm,
every time you and I, and this also, you're hanging out with other regular people, you can't really talk power platform dynamics with anyone else,
that's
right?
right.
Like you do with MVPs. But I felt with them it was kind of the same thing. So in June of 2015, I was asked to work with them to create the solution architecture training for Microsoft. They wanted to recruit other MVP, not other MVP, sorry. They wanted to recruit other solution architects, and they wanted to have kind of like a training for them. So I worked with them for months to create this solution architecture track, and then that became partner facing. So after creating it for Microsoft, it was partner facing, and we train a bunch of solution architects like that with kind of the same content. But
Hmm.
the solution architects within Microsoft were actually like really, really good technical guys that
Yeah.
went in and fixed the toughest problems and challenges, like the stuff that not even the product team could figure out sometimes. They
Yep.
would call Jason or Darren or one of these guys. They would go in. Like I remember Darren like flying to China to fix a problem, right? And these guys will solve it. They were like the special forces of the
That's
Microsoft
amazing. Yeah.
Dynamics 365 Dynamics CRM back then team, right? So that is kind of how the solution architecture program started. Then after we created that and we started training people and all of that, the Microsoft came up with the idea of allowing people to upgrade or migrate from on-premise to online, going through some kind of tool or solution that will allow you to go as old as CRM 2011, I believe it was,
Yep.
and upgrade all the way to CRM 2016 at the time, which was the newest CRM version then online, right? And obviously, as they started doing this process, there were a lot of complex issues happening, and the solution architects were called upon to help support that. Mainly Jason Kim. Jason Kim was the main solution architect of the FastTrack team that was created. I think he was the leader of that team initially, and they created essentially the rules of the game of upgrading from on-prem to online through the FastTrack team. And that they had some limits. I don't know if you remember this, Andrew. They had something like you had to have 250 users at least, and they
Yep.
had some, something like that. But anyway, as they started easing the restrictions on who can work with the fast track team and who can work in these projects, they started then opening it up to more and more companies, and the need for solution architects grew. So it's really hard for Microsoft and for anyone else in the industry. You too, your company, Andrew. Who do you work for, by the way?
I work for KPMG Australia.
That's right. Even for KPNG, recruiting high level people to be solution architects, it's really hard, and that also applies to Microsoft. So Microsoft said, okay, how can we get amazing professionals to be like solution architects without having to recruit them? Like, can we take all of these amazing professionals that are already working for great partners like KPMG, and kind of recognize them as a, put them through some training, do some testing. And I don't know what this process looks like because I've never gone through it. I just created the initial training for it, but I've never gone through it myself. Put them through a process and then certify them as fast track recognized solution architects. And this is pretty new, right? Like this has been around for only like 2 years or something, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And Power Platform, I think there was only one, maybe one or two individuals that were awarded last year. So
That's right.
it's very new. Mm.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about the process. Like, how did you find out about this thing? What did the process look like? And I don't know if there's an NDA on this that you can talk about it or not. I'm not sure how much you can share. I should have probably asked you this before we started the
I
show.
had a read. That's fine. It's okay. I've had a read of the NDA. So
um, but I want you to talk about the process of how you got into this, what was it like, and all the way ultimately to be recognized as a solution architect. And also, there I remember that they had other certifications for other products. Like I remember, even when I was like brand new with CRM, 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was, they had master certifications where you can become a master for Exchange, a master for SQL, for example, and they cost like $10,000 or
Mm.
$20,000 or something like that. You had to go to Microsoft and live there for like a month, and then you will be recognized as a master on Microsoft Exchange. It was pretty cool, and they were featured and all of that. This is not one of those things, right? Microsoft is not saying that you guys know everything there is to know about Dynamics. I want you to kind of talk about, again, all that process and just take us through the journey, I guess.
Yeah, gladly. Look, so I think I first heard about it last year at Microsoft Business Applications Summit. And a colleague of mine had been awarded the FastTrack Recognized Solution Architect recognition in Dynamics 365, and that guy was Ben Bartle. So we sort of celebrated as a practice, and that's how I got to know about the program. It sounded like a very interesting program from my perspective. I'm more of a technical person, and really interested in how a solution comes together. So I thought this would be something that would be very interesting to undergo, and not sure if it will sort of lead anywhere. But and then I heard via the partner network that they were accepting submissions for nominations, essentially, for this fast track recognized program. So what did the process look like? Initial step was to ensure that I had the right qualifications to even apply for this fast track recognized program, and that included a number of certifications, including in my instance it was MB 600, which is the Power Platform Solution Architecture certification. Um, Also, being able to talk about your experiences and provide almost like a project portfolio of projects that you've been involved in, and what your role was, what the user base looked like, what was the nature of the issue that you were trying to solve. So I provided that information to Microsoft in the first instance, and then I waited essentially while the Microsoft product team, the Fast Track team, those fantastic solution architects that live and breathe this stuff, reviewed the artifacts, and I got the opportunity to present to them. And so the presentation for me, that was it's an interview, and that was probably the most interesting part of this entire process. So I got connected with one of the Microsoft engineers. He's a senior program manager at Microsoft in the ASPAC region, and he basically we went into a broad discussion, and I understand that this was to sort of verify my knowledge of the platform, my approach to deployment and implementation. Um, so in terms of the things that we discussed during that interview, started with the basics, so things like data management, security, data modeling, then moving through to concepts such as ALM tooling, also what innovative uses of technology were used to account for sort of workflow integration requirements, and then being able to point to some form of evidence of that. So whether it's previous project work. So I was pretty prepared for this interview part. I had a lot of artifacts I could produce. There was sanitized information, so it didn't have any sort of client data on there or anything like that. Could talk about that freely, and just to walk through my overall approach to the problem. And so we went along this process. It took quite some time to get through, but it was really enjoyable. I've got to add that I really enjoy talking tech, whether it's like with individuals like yourself or solution architects at Microsoft. And I find that I'm probably most at home being able to talk technology with these guys, and so that I found the process. It wasn't stressful from my perspective. I think there was just we just got along really great, and being able to talk tech with your peers, and being able to explain how you went about things succinctly. I think it's very important to that entire process.
Right. I think that, when you do this for real,
Yep.
you're just talking about your experience. Like there's nothing to be afraid of. It's sort of like, how have you done this? How have you done that? And I'm sure some questions your answer was like, I haven't done that, or I
Yeah.
don't know. And I think that that's part of it, because I feel that that's what's missing on the 600 test that you mentioned, the solution architect test, is that anyone can take that test. And I've
Yes.
personally have seen people that I know personally have never implemented Dynamics ever, not once, posting on LinkedIn that, please congratulate me on getting my solution architecture thing. So this is somebody who Microsoft is saying, I can certify this
Yes.
person is a power platform solution architect. And I know personally that they've never implemented Dynamics or the power platform ever, not even once. And so that's when I was like, you lose kind of faith a little bit in some of those certifications. But when you go through a process like the one you went through,
Mm.
it's designed to kind of weed out the people that are really good at taking tests versus the one that do it for real, like you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you've done it for real, you enjoy that process. You like to talk to it, and you almost want to find someone that you like with the MVP summit, being able to find people who have been there as well, and just being able to talk through that process, or to essentially share your war stories with them. And I think that's something that is probably broader than just Microsoft. Now, I know prior to coming to the Microsoft land, I did a lot of work with Oracle, and we found that as well, being able to share those stories. And sure, you had your certifications to be a recognized architect in that space, but being able to say, okay, well, we know for certain that that's not typically how you would do things, and this could lead to some sort of issues. But these are the things that you can't really weed out other than through just experience and just doing these things, right? And
That's
so
right.
yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Okay, so you have your conversation. You're talking about the things you've done. They ask, and give me some example. You had 30 examples of everything because you've done
Yes.
it before. And then what happens?
So at that point in time, we go our separate ways for a while, and then they'll talk to the product team about sort of the responses that they were given, the feedback. They will provide just a general assessment, as far as I know, in terms of whether or not they would be recommending this person to go forward. And then hopefully, if you're successful, you'll be notified. It was actually a very orderly process. Um, so there was clear timelines in terms of when this announcement would occur, and when it will be celebrated at the sort of upcoming MBAS event with James
Nice.
Fillers. Yeah, and that's something really to look forward to, and it really. I think a lot for a lot of guys who don't haven't been part of the MVP award process. This is a really good experience from them, from their perspective. I know another colleague of mine who's also received it, Simrat. Shout out to him, and and they just it's something that they can feel good about. It's something that they can share with their families, and so I just really enjoy seeing that from the guys, because it's not often that you get recognized for all of the efforts that you do, especially if you're client facing and you're delivering, to 90% of the time. You've got utilization targets, you have time to blog and all those sorts of things. It's a great recognition for some of these guys.
Do
Um,
you do any studying, like for those conversations or presentations or anything? Like, were you preparing hard? Like, this is a hard test that I'm about to take. Like, how was that process?
so there was no clear guidelines in terms of how I should prepare. So I simply prepared the best way I could, and that was just to have all of sort of the artifacts, the documentation, and so on readily available, so that if it did come up during a conversation, I could talk to it. I find it a lot easier to talk to, say, solution diagrams and trying to actually explain these things. try to use visual aids around that. So that's what I'd recommend. There's no particular studying. I don't think you can really study for a process like this, if you know what I mean. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, you just got to be ready for it. You just got to be ready for whatever sort of comes your way.
Yeah, that's funny because that's kind of the same approach I take for the other exams. I try to take the exams when they're in beta mode
Yep,
because that allows me to see like all of the questions. Like a lot of people don't know that when you take an exam very early, number one, in a lot of cases you can take it for free because they want your feedback. They want to see if like everyone is failing or everyone is passing, which questions are everyone failing because they're too hard or too confusing, which ones are easy. That's part of like the exam creation process. And I just like to walk in. Like I don't study anything. I just walk
no,
in because I feel like, the purpose of an exam is to essentially confirm that someone who's a qualified candidate should be certified as a qualified candidate and someone who's not shouldn't. So if I go in and take an exam, let's say for CRM administration, although that exam hasn't been around for years, but
for a long
let's say
time.
that's what
Yeah,
I'm going to do.
yeah,
I should be able, if I'm a CRM administrator, I should be able to walk in, take the exam, and pass. Will I
yes,
pass with a perfect score? Probably not, but I should know like 7 out of 10 questions, 70%, which is a passing score, if I am a real CRM administrator. And he sounds like the fast track solution architect is kind of like that. Like there's more preparation. Obviously, you have to have these documents and collateral, basically, artifacts. But outside of that, just by being a solution architect for real
yes.
prepares you for it.
Yes, exactly. Yep, yep. And for me, one of the big things that I talk to my team about is what the operational risk is of doing things certain ways. Um, and the only way you sort of get that sort of knowledge behind you is if you've had projects that have failed in the past because it was done a particular way. And so these are things that you want to avoid as a good solution architect, right? And being able to have stories like that you could sort of talk to the engineers around it. We tried this approach, and so for this particular project, we recommended this path forward because it was less risky. It was just a more elegant solution overall, and they get that. I mean, they immediately they get that. I think so. Obviously, they've got an immense amount of expertise around this space, and they've seen it all themselves. And so that's what I mean. The exams just don't really prepare you for that. Exams do have a place in the world. I think you're right. That CRM administration exam, um, certainly from my perspective, just to understand which areas I was lacking in. And there was like, for instance, the sales one. I mean, I'd been doing a lot of XRM development up until the point where the original sales exam came up, and I was like, once I took that exam, there was some areas that I just bombed out in. So it was very clear to me that
Exactly.
it was like, well, these things exist. I mean, these out of box features exist. I mean, maybe I should be using that instead of trying to develop it.
Right. There are
And
discount lists, and
there
you
is,
start hearing all of these features that you didn't even know. Because the when they're creating those exams, they cannot just ask simple questions like which records are created when you qualify a lead. Like everyone knows that, but they want to go like obscure, right? They're gonna
yes,
ask questions about like, products, the product
yeah.
catalog and families and stuff like that, bundles and whatnot.
I think what's useful is to take an exam, or at least take a like a beta exam for an area that you're not that familiar with. So in my case, probably the module that I know least about is probably the marketing module. Because you've traditionally used sort of external marketing engines and that sort of stuff, and so
Right.
I figured that would be the next exam I should probably learn for. Whether or not I actually go ahead and sit the exam, but only just going through that process of learning about Dynamics 365 marketing is going to be useful to my career because being in pre-sales, I can estimate how long things are going to take to deploy. So if everyone's sort of recommending marketing, I like to at least know that my numbers are pretty accurate in terms of how much time I think it's going to take to deploy these things. So I'd recommend, if there's an area that you're not so strong in, probably instead of doing the stuff you already know, like CRM administrator exam, which doesn't exist anymore, but basically just go into the specific modules. Um, yeah,
That's awesome. Now, I don't know if you remember this because it's been 3 years for you. It's been, a few years for me as well. When you become an MVP,
Yes.
right? You go through like a huge ordeal. Like a lot of things get enabled for you, right?
Yeah,
For
it
lack of
does.
better terms, a
Yeah.
lot of things starts to happening. A lot of emails with the word NDA on it start coming in out of the blue. It's pretty cool. And this process, it used to be a little bit harder. It used to be like manual exchange lists and groups that were maintained, whatever. Right now it's a lot easier. You can kind of sign up for the ones you want, and they've done a really good job improving kind of the user experience from the MVP perspective. But
Hmm.
the point is, when you become an MVP, things just open up, right?
Yeah.
Options open up, software becomes available, things are out there. um what happens? Does something like that or something similar happens when you become a fast tracked architect? And maybe not talk about any specifics, but are there any like special tools or areas that you have access to that I don't?
I don't believe so. I think as an MVP, you do get pretty broad access to a lot of things. In fact, it's probably overwhelming. There's only so many distribution lists you could really subscribe to. It's information overload, especially for the first time MVPs. And I just tell them that look, you don't have to be subscribed to everything because it's going to overwhelm you. But anyway, um, in short, I don't believe so. I mean, you get access to the PowerCat team, the Fast Track Engineers. I think it's great. It's to build
Yeah,
those
those are
relationships.
awesome.
I haven't seen anything that's similar to the MVP program um, that we typically would get, but I guess I will know more about that in the coming months. I think a lot of this is still
Nice.
coming together. It would be nice to be able to have some sort of privileged access. Um, yeah, just to be able to help us do our day to day job. And
Exactly.
the other thing I should add is the fast track recognized solution architect recognition is only for 1 year, much like the MVP. So
Oh,
there,
interesting. I didn't know that.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah, that's right. So you will have to maintain your activities, your community activities, and your day to day work, and all the other things that come with it. And so I would, at this stage, for the guys who have just been awarded the FTRSA, is to make sure you're tracking those activities. Um, and particularly if you're moving around, if you're in the contracting world, just make sure that you're keeping a log of the things that you have done.
Okay, but wait. So if you're a fast track recognized solution architect,
Yep.
what do you have to do to keep it? Just keep doing projects that kind of qualified for that, or is it like MVP activities?
I assume so because it's not so much community based, right? It's not
Right,
really about creating blogs or articles. It's about excellence in delivery. So presumably that would mean just continuing doing a great job around that and making sure that you're prepared to talk about it with
right.
Microsoft when it comes time
Continue
to. Yeah.
continue to do the things that made you a fast track recognized solution architect on the first place, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep. Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I was just wondering if you had access to like some secret data
No.
center level,
Oh, well,
you
I can
know.
only talk from my personal experience, which is like brand spanking new. So someone else might come along and correct me on that.
Okay, well, you have
Yeah,
to come up with something that is not true,
yeah,
but sounds like it could be true. Like, oh
yeah.
yeah, I can reset the IIS on whichever, instance I want. I mean, you got to come up with something that sounds plausible. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, yeah, I can totally reset the IIS on that server. But,
Yeah,
it's my
exactly,
super
exactly.
secret fast track ninja
I
tool. Anyway,
like that. I really do
yeah,
like that.
that is cool. Now the type of after becoming, let me ask you this way: has anything changed for your work and the projects that you're working on since you became a fast track solution architect? Like, is your role now changing in projects, or
Not
how
really.
did KPMG reacted to that?
Um, look, it was great to be recognised internally within the firm as well. Having managers say, fantastic, and they were already pretty aware of the delivery work that I've been doing and how successful they'd been. So and for my other colleagues who received the recognition as well. So it wasn't really a surprise, but it was just really good to get that recognition internally in the firm as well. It just, yeah, it was sort of the icing on the cake. My day to day role hasn't changed, obviously, and still sort of wear many different hats around the business, and yeah, so that's pretty much it. It does add a lot of credibility to your firm, I believe, having fast track recognized solution architects, because they are on similar plane to sort of, your fast track engineers from Microsoft, who continually help you out with out of tricky situations on projects, and having somebody that's recognized, being able to have sit in on those conversations would be beneficial, I would have thought. So hopefully there'll be more opportunities to do stuff like that. But that's the extent of what I've seen so far.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the Fast Track Recognized Solution Architects, because like again, their feature, there's a page for this. Um, One of the things that you see on the information underneath each picture is how many fast track projects they've done, and they'll say
Yes.
5 or 3 or whatever.
Yes.
What is a fast track project? Like, how is that different than a regular project?
Understand that they are PowerCat supported projects, or fast track supported projects. So, like you said, with the fast track program, there's certain amount of licenses to make you eligible for some of these programs. And I don't know whether it's 300 or 400. Maybe you can talk more about that. But they have Microsoft do have some involvement and have some visibility of that project. And so I guess that would be the hardest part, is to find projects where there has been significant Microsoft involvement around that. And in my case, because we're talking Power Apps, they weren't necessarily like Dynamics 365, where you have massive deployments, you have massive user counts. That those Power App projects tend to be a little bit smaller in nature. So you're more likely going to be engaging with members of the actual Microsoft product, Power Platform product team, or global black belts in Power Apps, and maybe the Power Cat team. So it really depends, but I would say typically they are just projects that have had a significant Microsoft investment in it.
Now, in the past, as I mentioned, when the Fast Track program started, it was mainly focused on projects that involve migrating from on-prem to online. Is that still the case, or are there any other projects that are now part of the Fast Track that would qualify for it that might not necessarily be a migration from on-prem to online?
Many, I would have thought. Yeah, many of the engagements that I've been involved in, they haven't involved sort of using lifecycle services to migrate from on-prem to online. For a long period of time, that wasn't even available in my region. Um, but they've had a presence where they've been very complex sort of development, and so fast track engineers have been involved throughout that process to make sure that they have that quality assurance lens across the project and things run successfully. That's probably the most, and that their involvement can vary quite significantly. It could
Definitely.
be documentation review, it could be architecture review. How could you refactor this plugin that used to work that no longer would work in the new world, and things that the partner would typically struggle or would have a lot of wheel spin trying to resolve those issues. These fast track engineers, they're like gods. They come in and really
Unbelievable.
just unblock you like that. And I think that's the value of having those fast track engineers. They just do a great job around it. And most of them
Definitely.
have come from that consulting world as well, so they can understand from your side of things on the delivery and what that feels like.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask. If, in your experience working with fast track engineers, if they actually make suggestions. Because I feel that if I started as a fast track engineer tomorrow and I start working with you or, someone else, and they're like, well, I'm trying to convert this plugin to, work from on prem to online, I'll be like, but why? Why don't you do it this way? Because it's hard to get off that consulting mindset and
Yes.
trying to like solve problems,
Yeah.
and I wonder if any of them do that as well.
Yeah, they've made a lot of recommendations in the past, and I like to sound ideas out with them. So if I have access to, say, maybe the fast track engineers or global black belts, I'm thinking about doing an integration to this, I don't know, patient administration system, and what are a couple of different ways I could do that? And I've had some really interesting conversations around how would you go about doing that? What have the fast track guys seen work in other clients in a similar industry as well. Um, and so, yeah, out of that, I think it's just made my life in project delivery a lot easier. Plus, knowing that I've got some assurance. And so, one of the guys that I've been working on with a particular project recommended. I had an interesting use case around barcode scanning in a hospital theatre setting. Um, and so we were having some issues with the barcode scanner, and he was able to tell me that at Microsoft they bought like this, $80 Amazon barcode slash QR reader, wireless QR reader, which is essentially just act as a virtual keyboard. And I said, "Oh, you got a link to that? Can you send me that so I can order it for the client? We can just test it out." And so that's what we
Nice.
ended up going with in production. But I never really even thought about that, right? Just to get over the
That's awesome.
limitations of the barcode scanner. And they were able to give me the real on it, like he's saying, yeah, the barcode scanner in Power Apps works quite well, but just realize that it is actually going to the cloud to do its processing. So it's probably not going to be fast enough for, when you're doing in surgery stuff and you need responses really quickly. I'd recommend this, right? And
Nice.
it's up to
Nice.
you whether or not you use that suggestion. But I said, okay, well, let's give it a shot. I think it's a worthwhile suggestion. Let's try it, and it ended up being the solution. So just examples of the value that they add like that. I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And are they, based on your experience working with them, are they pretty kind of grounded in the whole Microsoft only way? Like, would
No.
have you seen them recommend like third party solutions, for example, or are they kind of sticking by no, you better use flows for that integration or whatever? How has your experience been working with them when it comes to maybe the best solution is not a Microsoft thing?
Yeah, typically not from the fast track team. They pretty much, um, I think what's that old sales adage? You can't BS a BSer. So really,
Nice.
they're happy to give you the real on it, right? And if this ends up being ultimately a better solution for the client, I think they'd be happy to recommend that. So I don't think they have any particular KPIs in terms of they have to sell, customer insights or another Dynamics product or things of that nature. But at the same time, we understand, like we're not going to be recommending like a direct competitor like Salesforce or one of their derivative products
Right,
because
right.
it wouldn't make sense really. So we try to keep things within the ecosystem. I think we have a common understanding around that, and plus, we've probably both all come through the Microsoft partner ecosystem. So there are sort of, I guess, unwritten rules around that. Yeah,
Right.
so I think that's no, never had any issues with that at all.
Yeah, because I wonder if they would be open to, let's say, I think you should go Kingsway Soft or whatever, like recommend something else if they really believe that that's the best way to do it. Anyway, that could be interesting. The other experience I had working with a fast track solution architect, sorry, with a fast track team,
Yep.
is I worked in a project where they were going from on-prem to online,
Yes.
and they decided that they wanted to also migrate their on-prem SharePoint to online SharePoint, and
Right.
they wanted basically everything to come together because on-premise Dynamics with on-premise SharePoint was integrated, so all those documents were connected, all those document locations and stuff. So they
Okay.
said, "Look, we want to move both of them online and keep the connections with all the documents and everything." Um, honestly, I have no idea how to do that without using the Fast Track team. I
Right.
don't know how to do it. Mainly because I'm not an expert in SharePoint. Like I know
Yep.
how SharePoint works and all of that, but I'm not an expert like I am an expert in the Power platform. So it was awesome to see that as we started the migration, the on-prem to online migration of Dynamics, they were a FastTrack customer, and they started thinking about like maybe we should do SharePoint as well. The SharePoint team, or sorry, the FastTrack team was like, okay, we'll bring an engineer from the FastTrack SharePoint, department,
Oh, that's
and
great.
we'll do it all at once. And they did it, and it worked awesome, and it was great. Like it makes you. That's one thing I like about the FastTrack team. It makes you as a partner look good.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
you know,
Yeah, yeah,
because they do such a good job.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, I really love that. um so the one thing and we kind of wrap up the show with is, if people are listening to the show, perhaps they are solution architects, perhaps they have been doing this for a while, implementing dynamics and all of that, and they're like, you know what, sounds like I want to be part of that club.
Mhm.
Sounds like I have the experience and the way to prove it. What is the process like to like apply and get in the queue to be considered to become a fast track solution architect?
Okay, so the nominations, I believe, opened late last year in Q4. So I believe that that's probably going to be a similar process around that. I haven't heard that that's going to change. So as soon as the nominations are open for Fast Track Recognized Solution Architects, and you don't necessarily have to be, you have to nominate yourself. You can nominate a colleague, right? If you think someone's doing a terrific job, just doesn't get the kudos for it, recommend them or have a discussion around them first, because it's going to be a bit of a commitment for them to prepare for it, right? But yeah, so as soon as that goes up in Q4, and presumably if you're in that ecosystem, you would hear about it through a number of different social channels. I'd say
Right.
yeah, make that application or make that nomination first, right? And then hopefully they'll reach out to you and tell you what your next steps are. But what from there on, they manage the process quite clearly. They clearly define timelines of when things are expected and when you're likely to get a call if you progress and that sort of stuff. It's pretty straightforward from that point on.
That's awesome. Did you get any cool like gear or swag once you got your fast track recognized solution architect?
It's in the mail, I hear.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So I'll post something about it.
I
Should be
mean,
cool. I wouldn't mind a trophy.
I would go and get at least a T-shirt, right, with a with a badge, fast track recognized solution architect. Just put it in my chest and just go to work with it, right? Every time somebody's like, actually, you know what, Andrew, I don't think you just point to your chest, like, look at the badge,
What
you
does your
know.
laptop
Good.
cover look like today? Have you got it completely filled up with stickers now?
Exactly. Just
Yeah,
like, hey, come on, respect the badge. I'm just
that's
saying.
right. That's right.
Um, that's awesome, Andrew. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey to become a recognized solution architect by the Fast Track team. Congratulations on that. If people have any other questions or comments, hopefully they request that you join us in another show because you're awesome. Love having you here. What's the best way to reach you?
Probably via LinkedIn. So Andrew Lee, or my website on 365 lyf.com, 365 life. Yeah,
That's awesome. And I'll drop the link to your LinkedIn on the notes for the show. Andrew, thank you so much, man. I'm really looking forward to seeing you again in person.
likewise. Yeah.
Just no more virtual stuff. I always have a blast talking to you about dynamics. As you know, I believe that the number of people that really do this for a living, like you, and our MVPs are small.
Hmm.
I think that a lot of people believe that all MVPs are like solution architects like you, and that's not the case. So I always have a blast, getting in touch with you and talk about what's new. And we don't even talk about dynamics all the time. Like we were talking about baseball,
Yeah.
like yesterday or whatever, the day before
Yeah.
yesterday. So it's always awesome to connect with you. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Oh, you're a legend. Thank you very much, Gus.
Absolutely. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode. If you have any questions or comments for Andrew, you can also email us at info@crmmvppodcast.com. And if you have any questions or comments or recommendations for future guests, feel free to drop us a line as well, or tweet us at CRMMVP Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.